Hello, everyone. My name is Donghyun Kwon, and I'm currently working at the Electronics and Telecommunications Research Institute in South Korea. This paper was submitted when I was PhD candidate in Seoul National University. As described in the title, today I will talk about the technique to implement eXecute-Only memory on Cortex-M processors. At first, what is the eXecute-Only memory? The eXecute-Only memory is the memory that can be executed but that cannot be read and modified. So this UXOM provides some access control property. So UXOM has been used to protect the sensitive code such as intellectual properties. Most recently, UXOM has also been used as a key primitive for protection against the dynamic code disclosure-based code review attack. So in these works, by putting the code in the UXOM, they can efficiently prevent the attacker from obtaining the gadget. So today, many CPU architectures already provide UXOM by using their memory management unit called MMU. However, ARM v7m architecture, which used in Cortex-M processors, does not provide UXOM. To be specific, instead of MMU, this architecture supports memory protection unit called MPU. Although MPU also provides access control of the memory regions, but it does not support UXOM as a configurable memory permission. So, motivated by this situation, in this paper we propose a micro-UXOM, a new software technique to implement software execute-only memory on Cortex-M processors. Before I talk about the design of a micro-UXOM, I briefly explain the threat model and what we assumed when I designed the micro-UXOM. For the threat model, we considered the software attacks and runtime. But we did not consider any offline attacks and hardware attacks. However, we believe that our attackers are still powerful to seize the security of the target system. Because by exploiting the software vulnerabilities, the attacker can have arbitrary memory read and write capabilities. Moreover, by using these capabilities, the attacker can subvert the control flow. And we do not trust any software components, including the exception handlers, because many embedded systems have event-driven nature. So the OS code, including the exception handlers, take a large portion of the code base. So for the better security guarantee, we do not trust this code. And finally, we assume that the software components, all software components in the system are executed in privileged mode. This is no surprise for the embedded systems because these systems typically have a real-time constraint, and the privileged mode switching is often considered an expensive operation. Now let me explain the basic approach of micro-UXOM. At first, as mentioned before, we utilize the fact that most of embedded systems are running in privileged mode. Then we use the MPU to configure the access permissions of the code memory as a readable and executable for privileged mode and non-accessible for unprivileged mode. Finally, we convert all memory load instructions to the unprivileged ones, which is provided in ARM v7m architecture. Compared to the ordinary memory instructions, the unprivileged memory instruction has a special property, which is it accesses the memory with unprivileged mode, regardless of the actual processor mode. So as a consequence, the code memory is still executable because the readable and executable permission for privileged mode. However, the load instruction, the unprivileged load instruction cannot read the code because the non-accessible permissions for unprivileged mode. In addition, we also convert all memory store instruction to the unprivileged ones. This is because in ARM v7m architecture, many system configurants, including the MPU, are controlled by the memory mapped register in private peripheral region called PPB. So microzone could be invalidated if an attacker tampers these registers with software vulnerabilities. Fortunately, in ARM v7m architecture, PPB can be accessed only in privileged mode. So just changing the memory store instructions to the unprivileged one, then we can prohibit such a threat. However, as expected, this simple design is not applicable to the real world. So let me explain the challenges of microzone and how we address those challenges. First problem is that not all memory instructions are compatible to the unprivileged ones. For exclusive memory instructions, its exclusiveness cannot be emulated by unprivileged instructions. And the system will be broken if the memory load instructions are originally intended to access the PPB are converted to unprivileged instructions. Thus, this instruction must not be converted to unprivileged memory instructions. Challenge 2 and challenge 3 are the problems when an attacker used the unconverted memory instructions caused by challenge 1 by exploiting indirect branches and exception return. One interesting point of challenge 3 is that in Cortex-M processors, an exception and return occurs when a unique value is assigned to the PC register. And the exception state, including the actual return exception address, is stored in the stack, is automatically restored by the hardware. Thus, it implies the following attacks. So, if an attacker manipulates the exception return address stored in the stack, the attacker can directly execute the unconverted instruction by using the exception return. Challenge 4 denotes the case when an attacker exploits the unconverted memory instructions with a malicious payload while following the legitimate control flow. Challenge 5 is, unlike other challenges, is a challenge that relates to the unintended instructions, which caused by unaligned execution of the 32-bit instruction or executing embedded data in the code memory. So now I will explain how microzone addressed those challenges. The first task we did is to find out unconvertible memory instructions. Fortunately, exclusive memory instructions were easily distinguished by the OP code in the instruction. However, in case of PPB access instructions, more sophisticated static analysis was required. We conducted a backward slicing technique to track how the accessed memory address is calculated. Then, if the address points to the PPB region, we identify it as an access to the PPB region. After the identification of the unconverted memory instruction, we apply our atomic verification technique to these instructions. The atomic verification technique includes several code instrumentations. I will explain these one by one with a simple example. First, we locate the verification routine before the unconverted memory instruction. By doing this, we can prevent exploit of unconverted memory instruction with a malicious payload, as mentioned in challenge 4. So, of course, the verification routine is different according to the type of unconverted memory instruction. For more information about this routine, please refer to our paper. Then we disable the exceptions while executing these instructions, because the attacker can bypass the verification routine by raising an exception right before the unconverted instructions. However, we add the verification routine still attacker can bypass, can still exploit the unconverted memory instructions, as mentioned in challenge 2 and 3. To prevent this, in microzone, we guarantee that unconverted memory instruction cannot point to a sensitive address. So if the atomic instruction sequence is not sequentially. To enforce this, the basic strategies are as follows. First, we allocate a dedicated register as a memory address register for unconverted memory instructions. Then we enforce that while the atomic instruction sequence is executed, the dedicated register holds a sensitive address, such as memory mapped registers in PPB. And then after the execution is over, we set the dedicated register to hold a non-harmful value. However, as the general purpose registers can have a value, any value during the runtime, enforcing the invariant property 2 for general purpose register requires a tremendous instrumentation overhead. So to avoid such a problem, we reserve the dedicated register only for the atomic instruction sequence. However, this implementation also have a performance problem because it can additional register pairs and eventually it causes a performance drop in the problem with a high register pressure. Thus, in microzone, we employ the other strategies that use a stack pointer as a memory address of these unconverted memory instructions. Obviously, still we needed to code instrumentation to enforce invariant property 2 on stack pointer register. However, after the static analysis, we find out that enforcing the invariant 2 on stack pointer register can be implemented in an efficient way. That is, according to our analysis, the stack pointer register mostly updated by adding or subsetting a constant because of the prologue or epilogue of functions. So the attacker who can manipulate the control flow can use these instructions to make the stack pointer register hold a sensitive memory address. However, in many cases, there is a stack pointer-based memory instructions before the indirect branch. So during the code reuse attack, it eventually generates an access fault because it would access the unused memory address region between the code and data or code and PPB region. As a consequence, we can reduce the larger amount of the instrumentation for enforcing invariant property on stack pointer register. And in particular, thanks to this efficient instrumentation technique, we don't need to reserve the stack pointer register only for atomic instruction sequence. Here is the instrumented code when atomic prediction technique is applied. As you can see, stack pointer register only holds the sensitive address from line 5 to line 9. Next, let me talk about how to solve the unintended instruction problem. In brief, to address this unintended instruction issue, we replace each exploitable instruction into the alternative instruction sequence that serve the same functionality as the original instruction and is not exploitable for unintended instruction issue. Now I will explain our evaluation result. All code instrumentation of microzone is implemented by using LLVM, and the binary analysis of microzone is implemented using Radeon 2. All experiments are conducted on Arduino 2 board, which has a Cortex-M processor, and we use a Riot OS as our embedded system OS, and PIPS benchmark to measure the performance of overhead. This slide the result of performance and performance in terms of code size, execution time, and energy. As you can see, the micro-JOM has a superior result compared than the SFI JOM. The SFI JOM is the software fault isolation-based JOM. So in this version, we add a mask instruction to the every load instructions and regulate every indirect branches not to jump the memory load instruction directly. I don't have enough time. So this is the, I want to conclude this talk. Micro-JOM is a software technique to implement the executing memory using MPU and unprivileged memory instructions. And most of our micro-JOM is designed under the strong SRAM model. And even all software components are untrusted. Also, the evaluation results show that micro-JOM is more efficient and secure than SFI-based JOM. And micro-JOM is comparable with existing JOM-based security solutions, such as key protection and CRA defense. Okay, thank you for listening. Please, any questions?
Question? John?
Hi, John Crizzle, University of Rochester. So one question I have about your work is that you're using execute-only memory to hide the code layout in defensive code reuse attacks. However, have you verified that you have enough physical address space in your system so that randomization, diversification, is actually useful, right? So for example, if you have too few bits of entropy, say like 16 bits of entropy, then at least on systems of about 10 to 15 years ago, that was insufficient to protect against code reuse attacks, like return to libc attacks. So have you actually looked at how much entropy you're getting on your evaluation systems?
Do you mean that what kind of code diversification is used in our benchmark?
Well, how much diversification can you get, right? So when you're on a 64-bit server system, you have 2 to the 64 bits of entropy, right? You have ridiculous amounts of it, right? But
yeah.
You're on embedded systems, right? So some of these systems only have like 1 megabyte of RAM and no virtual memory.
I think we can increase the entropy with several diversification techniques together.
All right, perhaps we should chat offline. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay.
From Intel. You referred to some of the already supported solutions on x86 in EPT or MPX. Was there any reference or knowledge that you could leverage for this design on solution?
Oh, sorry, I don't understand.
No, in your presentation,
Yeah.
you referred to x86 architecture which supports executable-only memory
Yes.
feature in EPT and MPX. And my question is, did you reuse or any knowledge from that architecture designed to support the ARM architecture?
Actually, this architecture supports some as memory permissions in MMU, but in micro-JOM we implement the JOM as a software way by using the special instruction called unprivileged memory instructions. Yeah.
Okay.
So it is a little different with that architectures.
Zephyr from UC Irvine. Really nice work. So I'm curious, there must be some instruction that cannot be converted to the unprivileged ones. So do you have a number, how many of these?
I'm not remember the exact. It's not that too much.
I see.
So,
Yeah, thanks.
Let's thank Donghyun again.